It is the dawn of the early Middle Ages. Western Europe lies in ruins. The Roman Empire long collapsed, its legacy fading into memory. In this void, a new force emerges, one that will shape the future of the continent. A single leader rises from the chaos, Clovis I, the founder of the Merovingian dynasty. By uniting the fractured tribes of the Franks and converting to Christianity, he not only secured his own power, but laid the foundation for what would become the heart of European culture. His alliance with the Church would bind faith and power together, shaping the destiny of the continent for centuries to come. Decades later, another great leader emerges, Charles Martel, the architect of the Carolingian dynasty. In 732, at the Battle of Poitiers, he faced the forces of the Umayyad Caliphate, halting their advance into Western Europe. This decisive victory not only secured his family's rise to power, but also changed the course of European history, ensuring the continent's Christian identity. Not long after, the Frankish kingdom reaches its peak under Charles Martel's grandson, Charlemagne. He expands the realm to dominate lands from the North Sea to the Mediterranean. This is more than a kingdom. It is the Frankish Empire, the most powerful realm in Western Europe. But empires do not last forever. After Charlemagne's death, his mighty realm splinters under the weight of internal divisions and external threats. The Treaty of Verdun, Viking raids and civil wars fracture the empire into new kingdoms. West Francia, East Francia and others emerge, setting the stage for the birth of modern Europe. In this video, you will get the facts, nothing but total history, no bluffs, no hype, just a clear, deep dive into the rise and fall of the Frankish Empire and its lasting impact on Europe. If you're ready for a no-nonsense exploration of history, you've come to the right place. In this exploration, we embark on a detailed journey through the origins of the Franks, their rise to power, and the eventual dominance of Charlemagne's Frankish Empire. To ensure the highest level of accuracy and depth, we'll be drawing from both primary and modern sources. The primary sources from this period, such as Gregory of Tours' Historia Francorum, Einhard's Vita Caroli Magni, and Notker, the Stammerer's Gesta Caroli Magni, offer invaluable first-hand accounts of Frankish history. These writings provide us with the stories of key figures like Childeric I, Clovis I, and Charlemagne, but they also come with biases, often glorifying their subjects or omitting critical perspectives. Alongside the primary sources, we will rely extensively on the works of modern historians such as Chris Wickham, Ian Wood, and Dan Jones. Their scholarship provides in-depth analysis and fresh perspectives on the early medieval period and the complexities of the Frankish world. Chris Wickham and Ian Wood offer detailed explorations of the political, social and cultural transformations that shaped the Franks, while Dan Jones brings a compelling narrative style to the history of the Middle Ages. Additionally, we will reference Mark Bloch's seminal work, Feudal Society, as supportive material. As a prominent member of the Annales School of Historiography, Bloch provides valuable insights into the social and economic structures that emerged during this period, enriching our understanding of how the Frankish realm transitioned into a feudal society under Charlemagne and his successors. Due to the length and depth of this video, we've also provided timestamps in the description, so you can easily navigate to the chapters that most interest you. Whether you're here for the rise of Clovis, the battles of Charles Martel, or the reign of Charlemagne, these timestamps will guide you directly to the sections you're looking for. All of the sources we use, both ancient and modern, will be listed in the video's description or pinned comment, so you can explore them yourself. Our goal is to provide a thorough and accurate account of the Frankish world, while acknowledging the complexities and potential biases in the historical record. The history of the Franks begins in the shadow of the Roman Empire during the twilight of the Roman West. Roman historians and chroniclers, such as Ammianus Marcellinus and the Panegyrici Latini, refer to the Franks as a confederation of Germanic tribes settled along the lower and middle Rhine River. The Franks were not a singular unified people at this time, but rather a coalition of different groups, which included both the Salian Franks and the Ripuarian Franks. By the late Roman period, the Franks had gained a reputation as fierce warriors and skilled raiders. Throughout the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, they conducted frequent raids into Roman territory, particularly along the Rhine, taking advantage of the empire's growing internal and external vulnerabilities. These incursions earned them a reputation in Roman eyes as both a threat and, increasingly, a valuable source of military manpower. As noted by Ian Wood in the Merovingian kingdoms 450 to 751, the Franks emerge in the sources as both a militarily powerful force and a flexible political group that could form alliances with Rome when needed. This adaptability, according to Wood, enabled them to gradually evolve from raiders to political allies within the Roman sphere of influence. By the late 4th century, the Franks were divided into 3 main groups: the Salian Franks, the Ripuarian Franks, and the Mosan Franks. These divisions were both geographical and political, shaped by the regions each group occupied. The Salian Franks settled in the Roman province of Gaul, occupying what is now the Netherlands and Belgium. As Patrick Geary explains in Before France and Germany, the creation and transformation of the Merovingian world, the Salian Franks were among the first Germanic peoples to be incorporated into the Roman Empire as foederati, with privileges that granted them land and a stake in the defence of the frontier. The Ripuarian Franks lived along the Middle Rhine near Cologne. Their traditional Germanic ways persisted longer than their Salian counterparts, though, as Geary notes, the gradual integration of Ripuarians into the Roman military system marked a shift in the relationship between the empire and its former enemies. The Mosan Franks occupied the Meuse River Valley in modern-day Wallonia. Though less documented, archaeological evidence highlights their integration into Roman society, while maintaining a distinct Frankish identity. As Chris Wickham points out in The Inheritance of Rome, the strategic importance of the Meuse Valley made the Mosan Franks a key player in the Roman defence strategy, while their semi-autonomy allowed them to maintain a unique cultural and political identity. These groups, while distinct, were connected by a common Frankish identity and were gradually drawn into the orbit of Roman politics as the empire struggled to maintain control over its western provinces. The relationship between the Franks and the Roman Empire evolved significantly from the 3rd century AD to the 5th century AD. Initially viewed as raiders and barbarians, the Franks became increasingly integrated into Roman military and political life, serving both as enemies and later as crucial allies, foederati. Roman emperors and generals often had to navigate a complex relationship with the Franks, balancing the need for their military support with the constant threat they posed to the stability of the empire. The first notable confrontations between the Romans and the Franks occurred during the crisis of the 3rd century, when the Roman Empire faced multiple internal and external challenges. The Franks, at this time still a loose confederation of tribes, took advantage of the weakening Roman frontier defences to raid deep into Roman Gaul and Hispania. One of the earliest Roman emperors to confront the Franks was Probus, who launched a series of successful military campaigns to push the Franks back across the Rhine. In 277 AD, Probus defeated a large Frankish force that had invaded Gaul. According to Roman sources, Probus captured many Franks, some of whom were settled within the empire to serve as farmers or military auxiliaries. This marked an early instance of the Roman practice of integrating barbarian tribes through settlement and military service, a strategy that would later define Rome's relationship with the Franks. Constantine the Great played a significant role in this evolving relationship. His campaigns against the Franks in the early 4th century were both punitive and diplomatic. Constantine defeated the Salian Franks in 310 AD, but as Ian Wood points out, he also established the precedent of settling defeated Franks within Roman territory as foederati. This blend of military might and political pragmatism defined the Roman approach to dealing with the Franks in the coming centuries. In 310 AD, Constantine again defeated the Franks, this time executing their leaders as a demonstration of Roman power. However, Constantine also adopted a policy of settlement, allowing the Salian Franks to settle in the region of Toxandria, modern-day Belgium, and the Netherlands. This marked the beginning of the Franks' formal integration into the Roman Empire as foederati, tribes settled on Roman lands in exchange for military service. Constantine's campaigns thus established a dual policy of both confronting and co-opting the Franks, setting a pattern that future emperors would follow. By the late 4th century, the Franks had become a crucial part of the Roman military system. Both the Salian and Ripuarian Franks were formally recognized as foederati, with many Frankish warriors serving in the Roman army. This relationship benefited both sides. The Franks gained land and security within the empire, while the Romans secured additional troops to defend the crumbling frontiers. One of the key figures in this evolving relationship was Julian, later known as Julian the Apostate. As Caesar, junior emperor, in the west under Constantius II, Julian was given command of Gaul and the task of securing the Rhine frontier, which was under threat from various barbarian groups, including the Franks. In 356 AD, Julian faced a major Frankish incursion into Gaul. The Franks had overrun several Roman cities, and Julian led a successful campaign to expel them from the province. One of his most notable victories was the siege and defeat of the Salian Franks at the city of Colonia Agrippina, modern Cologne. After driving them out, Julian adopted a more diplomatic approach, settling many of the Salian Franks in Roman territory as foederati and securing their loyalty as military allies. As Patrick Geary explains, Julian's success in pushing back the Franks and his later settlement of them within the empire highlights the balancing act that Roman emperors had to perform, using the barbarians as both a threat and a resource. Valentinian I, another Western Roman emperor, played a critical role in managing the Franks during the late 4th century. Valentinian was deeply concerned with the defense of the Rhine frontier and spent much of his reign fortifying the region against barbarian invasions. In 367 AD, Valentinian launched a series of military campaigns to deal with renewed Frankish raids into Roman territory. One of his most notable confrontations came in 370 AD when the Ripuarian Franks invaded Gaul. Valentinian's forces successfully repelled the invaders, and he subsequently strengthened Rome's relationship with the Salian Franks, granting them greater autonomy in return for military support. This cemented the role of the Franks as both protectors of the Roman frontier and, increasingly, as settlers within Roman territory. The 5th century saw the final collapse of the Western Roman Empire, during which time the Franks transitioned from foederati to independent rulers of Roman Gaul. This period was marked by both cooperation and conflict between the Franks and Rome, as Roman authority in the West disintegrated and barbarian groups carved out their own kingdoms. One of the most significant military figures during this period was Flavius Stilicho, a Roman general of Vandal origin who served as the Magister Militum, master of soldiers, under Emperor Honorius. Stilicho had a complicated relationship with the Franks, who were caught up in the wider conflicts of the time. In 406 AD, a massive invasion of Germanic tribes, including the Vandals, Alans and Suebi, crossed the frozen Rhine River and flooded into Roman Gaul. The Franks, particularly the Salian Franks, were caught up in these events, as some fought against these new invaders while others used the chaos to expand their own territories. Stilicho, already stretched thin defending Italy from the Visigoths, was unable to fully protect Gaul, and the Franks took advantage of the power vacuum to increase their influence. By the mid-5th century, Roman authority in Gaul was in steep decline. Roman commanders like Aegidius and his son Syagrius relied increasingly on Frankish support to maintain control over their territories. According to Dan Jones, Aegidius's relationship with the Salian Franks marked the last phase of Roman-Gallic cooperation, as both sides knew that Roman power in the region was crumbling. This delicate alliance would collapse with the rise of Clovis I, who would eventually defeat Syagrius and end the last vestiges of Roman rule in northern Gaul. However, the relationship between Aegidius and the Franks was not always smooth. After Aegidius's death, his son Syagrius maintained control over this enclave, which became known as the domain of Soissons. In 486 AD, the domain of Soissons would be conquered by Clovis II, marking the definitive end of Roman rule in Gaul and the beginning of the Frankish kingdom under Merovingian leadership. As the Western Roman Empire crumbled, the Franks took advantage of the vacuum to consolidate their power. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 AD, where the Franks fought alongside the Romans against Attila the Hun, was one of the last great examples of cooperation between the two. Chris Wickham emphasizes that this battle symbolized the fading influence of Rome in Gaul and the growing independence of groups like the Franks, who would soon assert themselves as rulers in their own right. By 457 AD, the Franks had moved from being federati to independent powers, positioning themselves to fill the void left by the disintegration of Roman rule in Gaul. Their role as both protectors of and inheritors from the Roman Empire set the stage for the emergence of Childeric I, who would lay the foundation for the Merovingian dynasty. As noted by Patrick Geary, the early history of the Franks is one of adaptation and opportunism, seizing the moment as the Roman Empire disintegrated and carving out their own identity and political power in Gaul. By the mid-5th century, the Franks had positioned themselves to play a decisive role in the post-Roman world, with their political and military structures firmly rooted in both Roman and Germanic traditions. This transition would culminate in the reign of Childeric I, the first known king of the Franks, whose legacy would pave the way for his son Clovis I to unify the Frankish tribes. In 1653, during routine renovations in Tournai, workers stumbled upon an extraordinary tomb, one that would captivate historians for centuries. Beneath the earth lay the remains of Childeric I, the first significant king of the Merovingian dynasty. His tomb, filled with gold coins, exquisite garnet jewelry, and 300 golden bees, was a testament to his wealth and power. These bees would later become an enduring symbol, adopted by Napoleon Bonaparte to represent imperial continuity. But what made Childeric so important in his time? And how did he rise to such prominence? Born around 436 AD, Childeric's world was one of crumbling empires and shifting allegiances. He inherited the throne of the Salian Franks in 457 AD, during the chaotic decline of Roman authority in Gaul. His kingdom was centered at Tournai, a Roman provincial capital in Belgica Secunda. As the Roman Empire fractured under the weight of internal and external pressures, local warlords like Childeric saw their chance to assert control. Chris Wickham notes that this period was a transition phase, with Roman institutions still lingering, but barbarian powers slowly rising to prominence. Childeric's reign is remembered for its military campaigns and strategic alliances, particularly with the Roman general Aegidius, This partnership symbolized the delicate balance between the remnants of Roman authority and emerging barbarian kings. Together, they launched campaigns against the Visigoths and Saxons, two formidable groups threatening the stability of Gaul. One of their key victories was the defense of Lutetia, modern-day Paris, a crucial stronghold for Roman and Frankish interests alike. This success helped Childeric consolidate power and expand his influence further into central and western Gaul. As Patrick Geary points out, Childeric's relationship with Aegidius demonstrates the ongoing relevance of Roman military structures in shaping the future of the region. Yet Childeric's path to power was far from smooth. His personal behavior, particularly his seduction of noblewomen, led to widespread discontent among the Franks. His subjects revolted, forcing him into exile in Thuringia for 8 years. During his absence, the Franks elected Aegidius as king, marking a rare instance of Roman authority being elevated by a Germanic people. However, Childeric's exile did not last forever. His eventual return to power was orchestrated by his loyal follower, Wihomad, who cleverly orchestrated his comeback. Before his exile, Childeric had split a coin with Wihomad, and upon his return, the other half of the coin symbolized his readiness to reclaim his throne. Upon his return, Childeric's rule strengthened. His marriage to Basina, the Queen of Thuringia, symbolized both his regained status and his strategic mind. Basina, who admired Childeric's strength and cunning, followed him to the Frankish kingdom. Their union would produce Clovis I, one of the most famous kings in Frankish history. Clovis would later unify the Frankish tribes and convert to Christianity, shaping the trajectory of medieval Europe. As Ian Wood argues, Childeric's reign laid the groundwork for Clovis's future successes. The alliances, military engagements, and political structures established by Childeric allowed his son to consolidate Frankish power and begin the process of unification. The discovery of Childeric's tomb, centuries after his death, provided historians with a rare insight into the wealth and artistry of the Merovingian dynasty. Among the treasures found were golden coins, a golden bull's head, and the iconic golden bees, which were meticulously arranged on his burial cloak. These bees became symbols of the Merovingian dynasty, later revived by Napoleon as a symbol of his imperial rule. Unfortunately, much of this treasure was stolen in 1831, with many artifacts melted down for their gold. However, engravings made at the time of the tomb's discovery provide a valuable record of these items, allowing modern historians to appreciate the craftsmanship and opulence associated with Childeric's reign. Patrick Geary highlights the significance of this discovery, noting that it sheds light on the cultural and political importance of the Merovingians in early medieval Europe. Childeric's reign stands as a critical moment in the history of early medieval Europe. His military campaigns helped to secure Frankish dominance in Gaul, while his alliances with Roman generals reflect the complexity of power dynamics in this transitional period. Chris Wickham notes that Childeric's success was not just about brute force, but about his ability to navigate the delicate balance between Roman institutions and emerging barbarian power structures. His reign represents the gradual shift from Roman rule to the establishment of new political entities that would define medieval Europe. Zooming out, Childeric's story is emblematic of the broader changes taking place in Europe during the 5th century. The fall of the Western Roman Empire left a power vacuum that was filled by leaders like Childeric, whose military and political acumen allowed them to carve out new kingdoms from the ruins of empire. His son Clovis would continue this process, eventually uniting the Frankish tribes and establishing the Merovingian dynasty as a dominant force in Western Europe. As Ian Wood observes, Childeric's reign serves as a bridge between the Roman and medieval worlds, a period of both continuity and transformation. In conclusion, Childeric's son's reign was more than just a chapter in Frankish history. It was a turning point in the story of medieval Europe. His military victories, Political alliances and cultural legacy set the stage for the rise of the Merovingians, a dynasty that would shape the political landscape of Europe for centuries to come. His tomb, with its golden treasures and symbolic bees, reminds us of the wealth and power that once defined his rule. Patrick Geary reminds us that Childric's reign represents both the end of one era and the beginning of another, as Europe moved from the world of Rome to the world of medieval kingship. As Childeric Wine's reign came to an end in 481 AD, his legacy was passed on to his son, Clovis I. Childeric had laid the groundwork through military success, strategic alliances, and his consolidation of Frankish power in Gaul. However, it was Clovis who would elevate the Merovingian dynasty to new heights. Under Clovis's leadership, the Franks would not only unite, but also begin to define the foundations of medieval Europe. His most significant achievement, the conversion to Christianity, would permanently alter the religious and political landscape of the continent. Clovis inherited not just his father's throne, but a vision for a united kingdom, one that would draw strength from both the Roman traditions and the barbarian identity of the Franks. While Childeric's reign symbolized the transition from Roman to Frankish dominance, Clovis would complete this transformation, turning the Frankish kingdom into the most powerful force in Western Europe. Through conquest, diplomacy, and his embrace of the Catholic Church, Clovis would succeed in what his father began, the creation of a unified Frankish state that would dominate the region for centuries. With Clovis I, the Merovingian dynasty entered a new phase, one that would solidify the Franks as the central power in early medieval Europe, influencing the direction of kingdoms and empires to follow. Taking the throne at just 15 in 481 AD, Clovis began as the ruler of a small Frankish territory centered in Tournai. By the time of his death in 511 AD, Clovis had transformed the Franks from a regional power into a dominant force in Western Europe. Clovis's early reign, while initially confined to a small area, soon expanded through a series of key military victories. His first major triumph came in 486 AD at the Battle of Soissons, where he defeated Syagrius, the last Roman governor in Gaul. This victory marked the final collapse of Roman control in northern Gaul and established Clovis's dominance in the region. As Ian Wood points out, this battle symbolized not only the end of Roman rule, but also the rise of new barbarian kingdoms that would reshape Europe. Clovis's most significant turning point, however, came not on the battlefield, but through a religious transformation. In 496 AD, during the Battle of Tolbiac against the Alemanni, Clovis is said to have called upon the Christian God for victory, vowing to convert if his forces triumphed. Following his victory, Clovis was baptized in Reims on Christmas Day, a moment that Patrick Geary describes as pivotal in aligning the Franks with Nicene Christianity. This was not just a spiritual conversion, but a political masterstroke, as it distinguished Clovis from other Germanic rulers who followed Arian Christianity, and it forged a powerful alliance with the Gallo-Roman clergy and population. Clovis, the first's conversion to Christianity in 496 AD, was a defining moment in European history for several reasons. First, it provided the Merovingian dynasty with sacral legitimacy, aligning the Frankish kings with divine authority, a concept that would influence the legitimacy of European rulers for centuries. As Patrick Geary points out, this elevated Clovis above other Germanic kings who followed Arian Christianity. Second, it provided the Catholic Church with a powerful new protector in the Franks, a vital alliance after the collapse of Roman imperial protection. Chris Wickham emphasizes that this connection between secular and ecclesiastical power marked a new era in European politics, where the Church became intertwined with the destiny of emerging kingdoms. This strategic conversion not only secured Clovis's rule, but also gave him a powerful new base of support among the Gallo-Roman clergy and nobility. The Catholic Church, having lost the protection of the Roman Empire, found in the Franks a new secular partner to defend its interests. This symbiotic relationship would define the Frankish monarchy and set a precedent for future alliances between church and state throughout the medieval period. In a broader context, Clovis's baptism at Reims also marked the start of the Christianization of Europe, where the Frankish kingdom became the bedrock of Catholic orthodoxy in Western Europe. This conversion distinguished the Franks from other Germanic tribes, such as the Visigoths and Ostrogoths, who practiced Arian Christianity. By aligning with Nicene Christianity, Clovis effectively tied his realm to the broader Catholic world, earning the favour of the Byzantine Empire and gaining a foothold in the power structures of late antiquity. This turning point in 496 AD also laid the foundation for future collaboration between the Frankish kings and the papacy, influencing the spread of Christianity across Europe. The Frankish Church would not only help shape religious life, but also support the Frankish state, lending legitimacy to subsequent rulers, as Ian Wood highlights. This collaboration eventually culminated in the Carolingian dynasty, particularly with the coronation of Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD, which reinforced the connection between the church and secular rulers, a legacy that started with Clovis's baptism. This broader religious and political alignment was crucial in establishing the Franks as the primary defenders of Catholicism in Europe, a role they would continue to play for centuries. Clovis's conversion was, therefore, a pivotal moment that not only solidified his reign but also reshaped the religious and political landscape of Europe. With his new Christian identity, Clovis embarked on further military campaigns to consolidate his power. In 507 AD, at the Battle of Vouillé, Clovis decisively defeated the Visigoths and killed their king, Alaric II, which expanded Frankish control into Aquitaine. This victory solidified Clovis's dominance in Gaul, establishing him as the preeminent ruler in what would become modern France. His victories not only expanded his kingdom, but also elevated his standing with the Byzantine Empire, which recognized Clovis's importance in stabilizing the region. By the end of Clovis's reign, he controlled nearly all of Gaul, with the exception of Burgundy, and his rule extended across much of modern-day France and parts of Germany. Clovis's conquests laid the foundation for the future expansion of the Frankish Empire, which would continue under his descendants. However, upon his death in 511 AD, the kingdom was divided among his four sons, Theuderic I, Clodomir, Childebert I, and Clotaire I, in keeping with Frankish tradition. This division would sow seeds of conflict within the Merovingian dynasty, leading to internal strife that persisted for generations. Theuderic I inherited Austrasia, covering the eastern regions, including the Rhineland and parts of Germany. Clodomir, Childebert I, and Clotaire I shared the rest of the kingdom, dividing it into Neustria, northern and western Gaul, and Burgundy, central Gaul. Clovis I's legacy, however, was not just one of territorial conquest. His conversion to Christianity and alliance with the Church helped forge a Frankish identity that blended Roman traditions with barbarian strength. As Ian Wood explains, Clovis's ability to unite the Franks under one rule and his embrace of Christianity were crucial in shaping the political and cultural landscape of early medieval Europe. Zooming out, Clovis's reign is a key chapter in the broader transformation of Europe in the aftermath of Rome's collapse. His victories over the Visigoths, his defeat of Syagrius, and his unification of the Frankish tribes positioned the Franks as the dominant power in Western Europe. More importantly, his embrace of Catholic Christianity marked a major shift in the religious landscape, forging a lasting bond between the Frankish monarchy and the Church that would shape European politics for centuries. In conclusion, Clovis' reign was marked by decisive military victories, strategic political alliances, and his transformative conversion to Christianity. His achievements laid the foundation for the emergence of the Frankish kingdom as a dominant force in Europe, and his legacy as the Father of France endures to this day. His role in shaping both the political and religious trajectory of early medieval Europe cannot be overstated. The kingdom he left behind, though divided among his sons, would continue to influence the course of European history for generations, and his name, Clovis, would echo in the French kingship through the ages, evolving into the later royal name Louis. Following Clovis' death in 511 AD, his kingdom was divided among his four sons, Theuderic, Clodomir, Childebert, and Clotaire. While this division followed the Frankish tradition of partible inheritance, it triggered a series of violent power struggles that would plague the Merovingian dynasty for generations. According to Ian Wood, this pattern of inheritance caused frequent divisions and internal strife, weakening the kingdom's unity and long-term stability. Theuderic received Austrasia, the eastern part of the kingdom, which included modern-day Germany and the Rhineland. His ambitions led him into frequent conflicts, especially with his brothers. As the eldest, Theuderic sought to dominate the Frankish realm, and his military campaigns were largely aimed at expanding his territories at their expense. Clodomir, who inherited the Kingdom of Orléans, also had aggressive ambitions. His most notable campaign was against the Burgundians, a rival Germanic tribe. In 524 AD, Clodomir waged war on Sigismund, king of the Burgundians, capturing and executing him. However, Clodomir's success was short-lived, as he himself was killed in battle shortly after, leaving behind young sons whose fates would later become intertwined with the broader power struggle. With Clodomir's death, the division of his territory led to brutal infighting. Childebert of Paris and Clotaire of Soissons seized the opportunity to eliminate their young nephews, Clodomir's sons, to claim his land. According to Gregory of Tours, Clotaire and Childebert pressured their mother Clotilde to decide the fate of the children. In a cold political calculation, Clotaire killed two of his nephews, consolidating control of Orléans, while the third, Clodoald, escaped and became a monk, later known as St. Cloud. The brothers' infighting was relentless. Childebert led campaigns against the Visigoths in Spain, seeking to expand his power beyond Gaul, while Clotaire engaged in numerous conflicts to assert dominance over all his brothers. Over time, Clotaire gradually absorbed his brother's lands, uniting the Frankish kingdom once more under his rule by 558 AD. However, this unity would not last beyond his death in 561 AD, when the kingdom was again divided among his four sons, perpetuating the cycle of division and conflict. The constant division of the kingdom, followed by violent struggles among heirs, severely weakened the Merovingian state. These internal conflicts prevented long-term stability and opened the door for power to shift away from the Merovingian kings to figures like the mayors of the palace, particularly in Austrasia. This cycle of fragmentation, bloodshed, and power consolidation would continue until the rise of the Carolingians. In 629 AD, Dagobert I became king of the Franks and sought to restore the power of the Merovingian monarchy. He managed to briefly reunite the Frankish territories and centralized his rule in Paris. Dagobert was the last Merovingian king to wield real power, undertaking military campaigns against the Saxons and Slavs and strengthening ties with the Byzantine Empire. However, after his death in 639 AD, the Frankish kingdom once again fractured, and the influence of the mayors of the palace continued to grow. His sons, Clovis II and Childeric II, were weak rulers, and the monarchy's authority gradually declined. Chris Wickham notes that Dagobert's efforts to strengthen royal authority were undermined by the Merovingian tradition of dividing the kingdom among heirs. Dagobert's reign illustrates the periodic attempts by individual rulers to reassert royal authority, a pattern seen throughout medieval Europe. Yet, the entrenched systems of divided rule and the growing autonomy of regional leaders made these efforts unsustainable in the long term. As the Merovingian kingdom fragmented, Austrasia emerged as a dominant force in the early 7th century. Initially a territory controlled by one of Clovis's heirs, it grew in prominence due to its strategic position bordering Germanic tribes and its fertile lands. The mayors of the palace, originally the chief administrative officers for Merovingian kings, began to wield increasing authority, particularly as Merovingian monarchs became increasingly ceremonial figures, earning the nickname do-nothing kings, rois fainéants. Pippin of Landen was one of the early mayors of Austrasia, managing to consolidate power as the Merovingians weakened. However, the real shift came with Pippin of Herstal, who in 687 AD, after the Battle of Tertry, became mayor of the palace for both Austrasia and Neustria, the western Frankish kingdom. By controlling both regions, Pippin not only centralized Frankish power, but also laid the foundation for a new, effective form of governance. This marked the beginning of the era where the mayors of the palace effectively ruled the kingdom, while the kings became figureheads. Patrick Geary emphasizes that this transition of power marked the de facto end of effective Merovingian rule, leading to the emergence of Carolingian control. Pippin's reforms were crucial to the long-term survival of the Frankish kingdom. He implemented policies that reinforced military strength, expanded agricultural production, and maintained stability within the expanding territory. Patrick Geary notes that Pippin's policies, particularly his focus on military expansion, would later provide the resources needed to defend the Frankish kingdom against external threats. The growing authority of the mayors of the palace represents a broader historical shift in medieval European politics, where real power often shifted from traditional monarchs to strong regional leaders and administrators. This gradual transfer of authority paved the way for the eventual overthrow of the Merovingian kings, allowing for the rise of the Carolingians, who would become the dominant dynasty in medieval Europe. By consolidating power in Austrasia, the mayors laid the groundwork for a more centralized and efficient governance structure, transforming the political landscape of the Frankish kingdom. Charles Martel, the illegitimate son of Pepin of Herstal, became one of the most pivotal figures in the early Middle Ages. After his father's death in 714 AD, Charles faced opposition from rival factions within the Frankish nobility, but by 718 AD, he emerged as the dominant ruler of the Frankish kingdom. Known for his military genius, Charles earned the nickname Martel, meaning the hammer, due to his decisive victories in battle, which secured his control over both Austrasia and Neustria. His most famous achievement came at the Battle of Tours in 732 AD, where his forces successfully repelled the Umayyad Caliphate, halting the Muslim advance into Western Europe. The battle was a crucial turning point in European history, and Charles's victory elevated his status across Christendom. Patrick Geary highlights that this battle not only safeguarded Frankish territory, but also reinforced Charles's legitimacy as a ruler and protector of Western Christendom. However, while the Battle of Tours is often emphasized, Charles's real legacy lies in his ability to consolidate and reform the Frankish kingdom. Beyond his military campaigns, Charles was instrumental in reorganizing the kingdom's governance. He continued the trend set by his father, Pepin of Herstal, centralizing power within the hands of the mayors of the palace and diminishing the authority of the Merovingian kings, who had become figureheads. Charles appointed loyal noblemen to key positions, strengthening his administrative control over the kingdom. Paul Fouracre highlights that Charles's reforms in military organization and land distribution prepared the Carolingians for their eventual takeover of the Frankish kingdom. Charles also laid the groundwork for the eventual alliance between the Frankish monarchy and the Catholic Church. He distributed land to the Church in exchange for its support, establishing the basis for the feudal system that would dominate medieval Europe. The Church, in turn, saw Charles as a protector, and this mutual relationship provided him with the resources and legitimacy needed to maintain his authority. This relationship would later be solidified under Charles's son, Pepin the Short, and eventually under Charlemagne. Charles Martel's rise and reign signify a broader shift in medieval Europe, where the power of military leaders superseded the traditional authority of monarchs. His victory at the Battle of Tours became a symbolic moment in European history, but his true legacy was the administrative and political consolidation that prepared the way for the Carolingian dynasty. His efforts not only stabilized the Frankish kingdom, but also began the process of integrating church and state, a key development that would shape the political landscape of medieval Europe. Charles's reign exemplifies how military success, coupled with administrative acumen, could transform the political fabric of a fragmented kingdom. His ability to navigate both external threats and internal rivalries made him one of the most significant leaders of his time, setting the stage for the Carolingian Empire that would follow under his descendants. By the middle of the 8th century, the Merovingian dynasty had become largely ceremonial, with the real power held by the mayors of the palace, a position dominated by the descendants of Charles Martel. The last Merovingian king, Childeric III, reigned in name only, with no actual authority over the kingdom. His reign was symbolic of the complete erosion of Merovingian power, where kings no longer ruled but merely served as figureheads, while the mayors of the palace, particularly the Carolingians, effectively controlled the kingdom. In 751 AD, a seismic shift occurred in the political landscape of medieval Europe. Pippin the Short, son of the powerful Charles Martel, took the decisive step of deposing the last Merovingian king, Childeric III, and claimed the Frankish throne for himself, marking the formal end of the Merovingian dynasty and the dawn of the Carolingian era. His ascent was not merely a political coup, it was the birth of a new kind of kingship, rooted in the approval of the Catholic Church, which would shape the political and religious structure of medieval Europe for centuries. With the papal endorsement, Pippin deposed Childeric III, the last of the Merovingian kings, who had his hair cut and was sent to a monastery at Saint-Omer, not far from the sea in the far north of Frankish kingdom. This marked the definitive end of Merovingian rule, which had stretched back to Clovis I and his father Childeric in the early 6th century. As historian Rosamund McKitterick, professor of medieval history in the University of Cambridge, observes in her book The Frankish Kingdoms under the Carolingians, this transition was not merely a change of dynasty, but also the birth of a new kind of royal legitimacy, where secular and religious authority were intertwined. Pippin's coronation took place in Soissons later that same year. The event was momentous because it was not merely a political transfer of power, but a religious one as well. Pippin was anointed with holy oil by St. Boniface, acting under the authority of Pope Zachary, in a ceremony that imbued his kingship with divine authority. This act of anointing was unprecedented for a Frankish king and signified a new relationship between the Carolingians and the Catholic Church. The act of anointing solidified Pippin's reign as sacrosanct, linking the legitimacy of his rule directly to the Church. As Einhard, in his Vita Caroli Magni, a contemporary chronicler, writes, Pippin received the crown from the hand of God's priests. This alliance between the Carolingians and the Church would have far-reaching consequences, as the Church gained a powerful secular protector, while Pippin and his descendants secured religious legitimacy for their rule. Later, on the 28th of July 754 AD at St. Denis, he was anointed again by Pope Stephen II, further strengthening the bond between the Carolingians and the papacy. Dan Jones wrote in his book, Powers and Thrones, that together with him young Charlemagne, his brother Carloman and their mother Bertrada were also anointed and blessed by the Pope. This was more than the coronation of a king. It was the sacred affirmation of the whole Carolingian dynasty, whose first two generations would redraw the map of Western Europe. While Pippin's reign was legitimized through religious authority, his strength as a ruler was equally based on military success. One of the most significant moments came in 754 AD, when Pope Stephen II travelled to the Frankish kingdom to personally request Pippin's help against the Lombards. The Lombards, under their king Aistulf, were threatening Rome and the papal territories. Pippin, now an anointed king with papal backing, was bound to protect the church. Responding to the Pope's call, Pippin led two successful military campaigns into Italy. In the first, he defeated the Lombards, forcing them to retreat and securing the papal territories. However, Aistulf soon reneged on his agreements, prompting Pippin to return in 756 AD for a second campaign. This time, Pippin decisively defeated the Lombards, forcing Aistulf to relinquish control of key territories in central Italy, including Ravenna and the surrounding region, which he then handed over to Pope Stephen. This transfer of lands, known as the Donation of Pippin, laid the foundation for the Papal States, giving the Pope secular control over central Italy and further solidifying the alliance between the Carolingians and the papacy. Historian Rosamund McKitterick notes that Pippin's campaigns and his donation represented the first formal acknowledgement of the papal claim to temporal power. In addition to protecting the papacy, these campaigns reinforced Pippin's standing as the foremost military leader in Europe. The Franks, under Pippin's command, had proven themselves capable of defending not only their own kingdom, but also the broader interests of the Church. By securing the papal territories, Pippin ensured that the Church would remain a powerful ally for his dynasty and for his son Charlemagne, who would build upon this relationship to forge the Carolingian Empire. Pippin's military strength was central to his legitimacy as king, but it also established a new precedent for the relationship between the Frankish kingdom and the papacy. His successful campaigns in Italy secured the Pope's protection and set a pattern of mutual reliance between the Church and the Carolingian dynasty. The military victories in Italy did not only expand Frankish influence, but also ensured that future Frankish kings would be bound by their role as defenders of the Church, a legacy that would carry on into Charlemagne's reign. Pippin the Short's reign was not solely defined by military campaigns. It was equally marked by important administrative reforms that reshaped the Frankish kingdom. His ability to govern effectively was a cornerstone of his success, creating a strong foundation that would later benefit Charlemagne in building the Carolingian Empire. Pippin focused on both strengthening his control over the Frankish territories and reforming the military, ensuring the future stability of the Carolingian dynasty. One of Pippin's key reforms involved the redistribution of land and power to loyal Frankish nobles. By appointing counts and regional governors who were personally loyal to him, Pippin secured the loyalty of the nobility, ensuring their support in times of war and reducing the risk of rebellion. This practice laid the foundation for the feudal system, which would dominate medieval European politics for centuries. The close relationship between the king and his nobles was reinforced through vassalage, where nobles held land in exchange for military service to the king. This system centralized authority in the king's hands while delegating local governance to loyal counts, who maintained control over their regions in Pippin's name. Pippin's reforms also extended to the Church, which played an essential role in both his domestic and foreign policies. Pippin granted immunities to church lands, meaning that the church's property was exempt from royal taxes and military service. This policy ensured the continued support of the clergy, who became some of Pippin's most loyal allies. The Frankish church played a key role in maintaining social and political stability, supporting Pippin's reforms and legitimizing his rule. The military reforms undertaken by Pippin were equally important. He strengthened the Frankish cavalry, which had been the backbone of his father Charles Martel's military success. This allowed Pippin to respond swiftly to external threats, including invasions by the Lombards and Saxons. By reinforcing the cavalry and developing a more organized and professional army, Pippin ensured that the kingdom could defend itself and expand its influence throughout Europe. Additionally, Pippin focused on ensuring a stable legal framework within the Frankish kingdom. He expanded the use of Frankish law, emphasizing justice and the resolution of disputes through local assemblies and legal codes. This legal reform helped to reduce internal conflict and maintained order across the kingdom's vast territories. Rosamund McKitterick highlights that Pippin's domestic reforms not only stabilized the Frankish kingdom, but also created the framework that would allow for the Carolingian Empire to thrive under Charlemagne's rule. By creating a stable political, military, and legal structure, Pippin ensured that the Carolingian dynasty would be capable of enduring for centuries to come. Pippin's ability to combine military and administrative strength is a testament to his vision for the Carolingian dynasty. His reforms reflect a broader trend in medieval Europe, where rulers sought to consolidate power by creating stable governance structures, while securing the loyalty of both the nobility and the church. These reforms created a lasting framework that Charlemagne would later use to build one of the most powerful empires in medieval European history. Pippin the Short's reign ended with his death in 768 AD, leaving behind a unified Frankish kingdom that was far stronger than it had been under the Merovingians. However, in keeping with Frankish inheritance traditions, Pippin's kingdom was divided between his two sons, Charlemagne and Carloman the Serf. Despite this division, Pippin's domestic reforms and alliances with the church ensured a relatively smooth transition of power, avoiding the intense fragmentation that had plagued earlier Merovingian successions. Pippin's decision to divide the kingdom between his sons was rooted in the Frankish tradition of partible inheritance, but the Frankish system had evolved under Pippin's leadership. His reforms had strengthened the central administration, helping to ensure that the division did not immediately result in internal collapse. Yet tensions between the brothers were inevitable. Charlemagne, who had the stronger personality and military acumen, soon overshadowed Carloman, particularly after Carloman's sudden death in 771 AD, leaving Charlemagne to reunite the kingdom. Charlemagne, the son Pippin had trained for leadership, would go on to build on his father's legacy, ultimately expanding the Frankish kingdom into an empire that encompassed much of Western Europe. The political and military reforms initiated by Pippin were critical in allowing Charlemagne to consolidate and extend Carolingian power. Additionally, the church's alliance with the Carolingians, established during Pippin's reign, played a key role in Charlemagne's imperial coronation by the Pope in 800 AD. Rosamund McKitterick writes that Pippin's reign is often overshadowed by that of his son, but without Pippin's critical reforms, Charlemagne's empire would not have been possible. Pippin established the framework for Carolingian governance, grounded in military strength, loyalty from the nobility, and a deep alliance with the church. Pippin's legacy is seen not only in the territorial consolidation of the Frankish kingdom, but in the precedent he set for kingship. He shifted the foundation of royal authority from one based on heritage to one grounded in military ability, administrative competence, and religious endorsement. This shift not only ensured Carolingian dominance, but also set the standard for European kingship in the centuries that followed. Pippin's reign, and particularly his handling of the succession, is a reflection of the broader transition in medieval Europe from fractured regional rule to more centralized and cohesive governance. While the practice of dividing kingdoms among heirs continued, Pippin's reforms allowed for greater continuity of governance. His legacy, seen in both Charlemagne's reign and the enduring relationship between the Church and European monarchs, was one of stability and expansion. This stable succession marked the final consolidation of Carolingian power, positioning the dynasty for future growth. The broader importance of Pippin's reign lies in the way it bridged the Merovingian past and the Carolingian future, transforming the nature of kingship in Europe. By the time of his death, Pippin had established a legacy that would be solidified by his son Charlemagne, and the Carolingian dynasty would dominate medieval Europe for centuries to come. In the frigid winter of 752 AD, a young Charlemagne undertook his first significant duty on behalf of his father, Pippin the Short. Sent out into the icy conditions of northern Gaul, Charlemagne, barely 10 years old, was tasked with welcoming Pope Zachary to Francia. The scene not only set a precedent for Charlemagne's future ties to the papacy, but symbolized the growing alliance between the Carolingian dynasty and the Catholic Church, one that would become a cornerstone of his rule. Historian Janet L. Nelson describes this encounter as emblematic of Charlemagne's later role as a protector of the Church, noting that the Carolingians understood that strength lay in the bond with Rome. Rosamund McKitterick argues that this early moment in Charlemagne's life helped establish his image as a rightful ruler in the eyes of both the Frankish people and the Church. Additionally, Alessandro Barbero explains that the papacy's relationship with the Carolingians would set a new precedent for European rulers, intertwining secular and religious authority. Charlemagne's formative years were marked by the guidance of his father, Pippin the Short, and his mother, Bertrada of Leon. Born in 742 AD, Charlemagne's education and upbringing focused on preparing him for leadership, a legacy strengthened by the Carolingian family's close relationship with the papacy. This alliance was solidified on July 28, 754, when Pope Stephen II arrived in Saint-Denis to crown Pippin as King of the Franks. Charlemagne, his brother Carloman, and his mother Bertrada were all present at this anointing, a ceremony that conferred divine right on the family, underscoring the sacred nature of their rule. This event was significant as it set a new precedent for royal authority through divine sanction. Historian Joachim Ehlers notes that this coronation established a model of kingship linked closely to the Church, one that Charlemagne would later build upon. Matthias Becker highlights how the anointing symbolized a new era for the Franks, where their rulers were not merely secular leaders, but spiritual figures. Jintaro Fuji adds that the inclusion of Charlemagne and his family in the ceremony positioned them as the chosen family for ruling Western Europe, a notion that Charlemagne would embrace and expand upon in his later reign. When Pippin the Short died in 768 AD, his kingdom was divided between Charlemagne and Carloman, in line with Frankish inheritance traditions. However, tension between the two brothers mounted, only to be cut short by Carloman's sudden death in 771 AD. With Carloman's passing, Charlemagne assumed sole rule of the Frankish kingdom, solidifying his position and beginning a reign that would shape medieval Europe. Charlemagne's first major campaign began in 773 AD, when he responded to Pope Adrian I's call for assistance against the Lombards, who were threatening Rome. Charlemagne led his forces into Italy, besieging the Lombard capital at Pavia, and ultimately deposing King Desiderius. In 774 AD, Charlemagne crowned himself King of the Lombards, adding the title to his expanding empire. Historian Roger Collins describes this conquest as the first clear step in Charlemagne's transformation from a regional ruler to a European monarch. In 778 AD, Charlemagne attempted to expand his influence into the Iberian Peninsula to challenge the Umayyad Caliphate and protect the Frankish border. However, this campaign ended in a dramatic retreat, culminating in the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass, where Charlemagne's rear guard, including the notable commander Roland, was ambushed by Basque forces. This defeat was later mythologized in the Song of Roland, becoming one of the earliest examples of French epic poetry. Jean Favier explains that Charlemagne's campaigns in Iberia were part of his broader strategy to establish Frankish dominance in Western Europe and gain prestige among Christian rulers. Heinrich Fichtenau adds that although the campaign did not achieve its immediate objectives, the battle's legendary status reinforced Charlemagne's image as a defender of Christendom. Perhaps Charlemagne's longest and most brutal campaigns were those against the Saxons, beginning in 772 AD and lasting over 3 decades. The Saxons resisted Frankish and Christian rule fiercely, leading to a prolonged conflict that included forced conversions, the destruction of Saxon religious sites, and mass executions, most infamously the massacre of Verdun in 782 AD, where Charlemagne reportedly ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxon captives who refused to convert to Christianity. Pierre Richer writes that the Saxon Wars were essential for consolidating Charlemagne's empire, but cast a dark shadow over his reign due to their brutality. Janet L. Nelson emphasizes the ideological aspect of these wars, portraying Charlemagne as a ruler determined to create a unified Christian state. Matthias Becker points out that despite the harsh measures, Charlemagne ultimately succeeded in incorporating Saxony into his empire, reshaping the region's religious and cultural landscape. Charlemagne's reign extended beyond Europe, as he maintained diplomatic relations with the Abbasid Caliphate. In 801 AD, he exchanged gifts with Caliph Harun al-Rashid of Baghdad, receiving luxury items including the famous elephant Abul Abbas. This diplomatic gesture symbolized a mutual respect between two powerful rulers, with Charlemagne and Harun viewing each other as valuable allies against common adversaries, such as the Umayyads in Spain. Historian Joachim Ehlers explains that Charlemagne's exchanges with Harun al-Rashid represented a rare instance of cooperation between Christian and Islamic powers during this period. Rosamund McKitterick describes how these interactions reinforced Charlemagne's image as a formidable figure even outside of Europe. Roger Collins highlights that these exchanges broadened the Frankish court's exposure to other cultures, enriching its cultural influence. Relations with the Byzantine Empire were more complicated. Charlemagne's self-proclaimed title of Emperor in the West challenged Byzantine authority, as Constantinople traditionally viewed itself as the sole Roman Empire. Tensions simmered, particularly as Charlemagne expanded his influence over Italy, but the two empires maintained a delicate balance. In 812 AD, after protracted negotiations, the Byzantine Emperor Michael I formally recognized Charlemagne as Emperor of the Franks, if not of the Romans. Janet L. Nelson argues that this recognition was a diplomatic victory for Charlemagne, establishing his equal footing with the Eastern Empire. Jean Favier adds that while the Byzantines remained cautious of Charlemagne, the mutual recognition helped stabilize relations. Alessandra Barbero notes that this agreement marked a significant shift in East-West relations, laying groundwork for later cooperation and conflict. Charlemagne's relationship with the papacy was pivotal in his consolidation of power. Following Pope Adrian I's call for help against the Lombards in 773 AD, Charlemagne established himself as protector of Rome. This alliance culminated in 800 AD, when Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans. This act solidified Charlemagne's authority over Western Christendom and began the era of the Holy Roman Empire. According to Rosamund McKitterick, the papacy's endorsement elevated Charlemagne's rule to a new level of spiritual and secular authority. Matthias Becher points out that this coronation established the Carolingian dynasty as the preeminent force in Western Europe. Heinrich Fichtenau highlights the significance of the coronation as a defining moment for medieval kingship, intertwining divine right with political power. On Christmas Day in 800 AD, Charlemagne attended Mass in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. In a dramatic moment, Pope Leo III placed a crown upon Charlemagne's head, declaring him Emperor of the Romans. This coronation symbolized the union of Frankish and Christian power, reshaping the political landscape of Europe and solidifying Charlemagne's role as the ultimate ruler in the West. The coronation had far-reaching political and symbolic implications. It not only asserted Charlemagne's dominance over Western Europe, but also redefined the church-state relationship. By crowning him emperor, the papacy bestowed divine sanction upon Charlemagne's rule, setting a precedent for the mutual dependence of the papacy and the Holy Roman emperors in medieval Europe. Rosamund McKitterick argues that Charlemagne's coronation as emperor created a model for medieval European governance, where religious and political authority were intertwined. Jean Favier describes the event as a turning point, reshaping the concept of kingship by infusing it with spiritual authority. Matthias Becher concludes that this coronation effectively made Charlemagne the spiritual and temporal leader of Christendom, uniting Western Europe under a single imperial vision. To strengthen his vast empire, Charlemagne implemented a system of governance that balanced central authority with local control. He established the Missi Dominici, royal envoys sent in pairs to supervise local lords and ensure adherence to his policies. This system helped Charlemagne maintain control over distant territories and check the power of his vassals, ensuring that the empire remained cohesive despite its size. Roger Collins highlights the effectiveness of the Missi Dominici in stabilizing Charlemagne's empire by extending his influence into local governance. Joachim Ehlers suggests that these reforms were instrumental in maintaining the empire's unity, as they created a balance between regional autonomy and centralized authority. Janet L. Nelson points out that Charlemagne's governance reforms laid a foundational structure for feudalism, which would define European politics in the following centuries. At this point, we would like to stress that Mrs. Janet L. Nelson sadly passed away on the 12th of October this year, just in time of starting of creation of this video. Condolences to her family. Charlemagne's reign also saw a flourishing of culture and education, later known as the Carolingian Renaissance. He established the palace school at Aachen, inviting scholars like Alcuin of York to foster learning and literacy among the Frankish elite. Under Charlemagne, the preservation and copying of classical texts became a priority, ensuring that knowledge from antiquity was passed down through the medieval period. Charlemagne's vision for his empire extended beyond military conquests to creating a political and cultural centre that would reflect his power and his ambitions for the Carolingian Renaissance. Aachen, also known as Aix-la-Chapelle, was chosen for its location near the empire's heart and for its natural hot springs, symbolising both the Frankish and Roman influences on Charlemagne's rule. By the late 8th century, Aachen emerged as the capital and became a centre of governance, religious devotion and intellectual life. At the core of Aachen's transformation was the skilled architect Odo of Metz. Charlemagne commissioned Odo to design the Palatine Chapel, a masterpiece that served as the emperor's personal place of worship and later as his mausoleum. Odo's design combined Roman, Byzantine and Christian elements, reflecting Charlemagne's vision of a unified Christian empire rooted in classical traditions. The chapel's octagonal structure, inspired by San Vitale in Ravenna, Italy, was central to Charlemagne's palace complex, symbolizing the Holy Roman Empire's spiritual and political authority. Odo's architectural achievements in Aachen extended beyond the chapel. His layout for the palace complex included residential quarters, administrative offices, and a grand audience hall, turning Aachen into a bustling administrative centre. Historian Janet L. Nelson notes that Aachen's development as the Carolingian capital signified a shift from itinerant kingship to a more centralized form of rule. Rosamund McKitterick emphasizes that the Palatine Chapel embodied Charlemagne's aspirations for a Christianized Roman Empire, merging sacred space with imperial authority. Charlemagne's influence extended into the religious sphere as he sought to unify Christian practices across his empire. He promoted standardized liturgy and ecclesiastical reforms that aligned with Rome, ensuring religious cohesion throughout the Frankish territories. His campaigns in Saxony further demonstrated his commitment to spreading Christianity, albeit through often violent means. Charlemagne's reign transformed the Frankish kingdom into an empire that spanned much of Western Europe. His military conquests, governance reforms, cultural revival, and religious unification created a legacy that influenced the course of European history for centuries. He left behind an empire strengthened by both secular and spiritual authority, setting the foundations for what would become the Holy Roman Empire. Alessandro Barbero argues that Charlemagne's reign was instrumental in forging a European identity, with his influence echoing through the ages. Janet L. Nelson suggests that Charlemagne's role as emperor, king, and patron of learning shaped medieval kingship and governance. Rosamund McKitterick concludes that Charlemagne's life symbolized the unity of Christian Europe, with his legacy enduring as one of the most influential rulers in history. Charlemagne's long and impactful reign came to an end on January 28, 814. As he felt the weight of age, he carefully planned his succession to ensure a smooth transition and avoid the fragmentation of his empire. In 813, Charlemagne crowned his only surviving legitimate son, Louis the Pious, as co-emperor in a ceremony at Aachen, thus positioning Louis as his chosen successor. This coronation underscored Charlemagne's vision of a unified empire governed by a single ruler, maintaining his legacy and the integrity of the Carolingian dynasty. Rosamund McKitterick notes that Charlemagne's choice reflected his desire to centralize authority and uphold stability after his death. Historian Janet L. Nelson emphasizes that crowning Louis as co-emperor was a strategic decision aimed at ensuring continuity in the Carolingian realm. This act was both symbolic and practical, placing Louis at the head of the empire even before Charlemagne passed. Louis the Pious was born in 778 to Charlemagne and Queen Hildegard. From a young age, Louis was groomed for kingship and instilled with a deep sense of religious duty which would profoundly shape his rule. In 781, at the age of just 3, Louis was appointed King of Aquitaine, a southern region in Charlemagne's empire. Though largely a symbolic title at first, it marked the beginning of his formal role in governance. As he grew, Louis developed under the guidance of scholars and clergymen who influenced his pious nature and devotion to Christian values. Alcuin of York, one of Charlemagne's most trusted advisors, helped shape Louis's education, fostering a strong foundation in Christian doctrine and Carolingian governance. Historian Pierre Richet notes that this education uniquely prepared Louis to lead with a focus on spirituality, which would later become central to his policies. After Charlemagne's death in 814, Louis the Pious ascended as the sole ruler of the Carolingian Empire, following his coronation as co-emperor in 813 at Aachen, a strategic move by Charlemagne to ensure a smooth succession. Louis's rule is marked by a combination of religious reforms, administrative strategies, and complex succession plans. But his reign was also deeply troubled by family conflicts and political instability. Louis earned his title, the Pious, through his strong dedication to Christian principles. Early in his reign, he initiated a moral reform across the empire, targeting corruption and ensuring that the clergy adhered to strict Christian standards. He ordered clergy and nobility alike to uphold the Christian faith, establishing councils to address doctrinal and administrative issues within the church. Historian Joachim Ehlers argues that Louis's intense religious devotion led him to prioritize spiritual governance, often at the expense of political pragmatism. This religious focus set a different tone from Charlemagne's reign, positioning Louis as a deeply spiritual leader in a time of rising secular and religious tension. In 817, Louis issued the Ordinatio Imperii, a document designed to prevent the fragmentation of his empire upon his death. This decree established a structured succession plan. His eldest son, Lothair I, would inherit the title of emperor and rule the central lands, while his younger sons, Pippin and Louis the German, would govern Aquitaine and Bavaria, respectively, under Lothair's overlordship. The Ordinatio was intended to uphold unity and limit disputes among his heirs, a lesson learned from the inheritance divisions of previous Frankish kings. Mosan Franks highlights that the Ordinatio Imperii was revolutionary for its time, as it aimed to centralize power and prevent internal strife. However, historian Janet L. Nelson observes that Louis's idealistic approach underestimated the ambitions and rivalries within his family, setting the stage for future conflicts. Despite his intentions for a smooth succession, Louis's relationship with his sons became increasingly strained. His decision to create additional lands for his youngest son, Charles the Bald, in 829 disrupted the established order, angering his elder sons and fracturing the empire. Lothair, Pepin and Louis the German rebelled against their father, culminating in the infamous Field of Lies in 833, where Louis was betrayed by his supporters and temporarily deposed. Jean Favier notes that this event deeply undermined Louis's authority, revealing the vulnerabilities in his governance. Heinrich Fichtenau argues that Louis's religious devotion and efforts for peace may have weakened his political effectiveness, making him susceptible to manipulation. The Field of Lies marked a pivotal moment in Louis's reign, with the empire's unity weakened as familial tensions escalated into open conflict. In the later years of his reign, Louis attempted to address the failures of the Ordinatio Imperii by revising his succession plans. This shift, sometimes referred to as Diversio Imperii, aimed to reallocate territories to balance power among his sons and reduce tensions. However, these changes only intensified the rivalry, as each son continued to vie for dominance. Joachim Ehlers explains that Louis's revisions were a desperate attempt to maintain stability in a rapidly fracturing empire. Matthias Becker suggests that the Diversio Imperii symbolized the increasing impossibility of managing Carolingian inheritance traditions in a vast empire. Louis the Pious died on June 20th, 840, at the age of 62, after a turbulent reign filled with religious devotion, attempted reforms, and intense family conflict. Despite his efforts to create a stable succession plan, his death left the empire divided. The resulting power struggles among his sons would culminate in the Treaty of Verdun in 843, which permanently divided the Carolingian Empire into distinct kingdoms: West Francia, East Francia, and Middle Francia. Historian Janet L. Nelson contends that Louis's reign highlights the inherent difficulties of balancing religious duty with effective governance in the medieval period. Rosamund McKitterick reflects on his legacy, noting that Louis's intense commitment to Christianity influenced medieval kingship, even as his political efforts ultimately faltered. Jean Favier remarks that the divisions and conflicts during Louis's rule foreshadowed the gradual decline of Carolingian unity, setting the stage for feudal fragmentation in the centuries that followed. After Louis the Pious's death in 840, his sons plunged the empire into civil war, unable to accept the divisions outlined in the Ordinatio Imperii of 817. Lothair claimed the entire empire, citing his status as emperor, but his brothers Louis the German and Charles the Bald opposed him, resulting in the Battle of Fontenoy in 841. This clash left thousands dead, showcasing the destructive power of Carolingian infighting. Lothair suffered defeat, and his brothers soon allied to counter his claims. The rivalry deepened divisions within the empire, and historian Pierre Richer notes that this period of civil strife displayed the instability inherent in the Carolingian approach to partition. Janet L. Nelson observes that these wars eroded Carolingian unity, undermining the dynasty's authority across Europe. Finally, in 842, the oaths of Strasbourg between Charles the Bald and Louis the German solidified their alliance against Lothair, marking a rare but pivotal Franco-Germanic pact. To end their conflicts, the brothers signed the Treaty of Verdun in 843, creating a clear division of the empire into three kingdoms. Lothair retained the title of Emperor and was granted Middle Francia, a stretch of land from the North Sea to Italy, including Aachen, Burgundy, and Provence. Louis the German received East Francia, encompassing much of what is now Germany, marking the early foundation of the Holy Roman Empire's Germanic territories. Charles the Bald took West Francia, which formed the basis for the future Kingdom of France. Verdun's division was unprecedented in scale and impact. Joachim Ehlers explains that while the treaty temporarily ended hostilities, it marked the beginning of Europe's political fragmentation. Rosamund McKitterick notes that Verdun set a dangerous precedent of hereditary division in the Carolingian world. In 855, Lothair I fell ill and divided Middle Francia among his sons via the Treaty of Prüm. His eldest son, Louis II, inherited Italy and the imperial title. Lothair II received Lotharingia, the northern region of Middle Francia, later known as Lorraine, while Charles of Provence obtained the southern lands. This division foreshadowed the further disintegration of the Carolingian Empire, with each new ruler exercising semi-autonomous control over their lands. As Jean Favier observes, the Treaty of Prüm marked a shift toward regional autonomy, with power increasingly shifting to local nobles. Heinrich Fichtenau argues that Prüm's fragmentation laid the groundwork for feudalism, where landholding power was decentralized. The death of Lothair II in 869 without legitimate heirs led to new conflicts over his lands. In 870, the Treaty of Meersen divided his kingdom between Louis the German and Charles the Bald, with East Francia absorbing the eastern portion of Lotharingia and West Francia taking the western part. This agreement illustrated the growing divide between East and West Francia, accelerating the separation of the Frankish realm into distinct kingdoms. Historian Matthias Becker highlights the Treaty of Meersen as a turning point that made the Carolingian Empire's political divisions irreversible. Joachim Ehlers emphasizes that Meersen's impact further weakened centralized Carolingian authority, encouraging noble families to strengthen their local power. The Treaty of Ribemont in 880 marked a critical turning point in the Carolingian Empire's fragmentation, following the deaths of Louis the German in 876 and Louis the Stammerer in 879. Political instability continued as their heirs sought to assert control over disputed territories. Louis the Younger of East Francia and Louis III and Carloman II of West Francia met to formalize the boundaries, with Lotharingia granted to East Francia. This consolidation under East Frankish rule entrenched the division between East and West Francia, setting a precedent for future German and French territorial boundaries and signaling the empire's steady fragmentation into separate political entities. Rosamund McKitterick points out that Ribemont furthered the process of disintegration, with East and West Francia emerging as distinct political entities. The treaty marks a final stage of territorial division before the Carolingian Empire faded into a landscape dominated by feudal lords. The Viking invasions of the 9th century exposed the vulnerability of the fragmented Carolingian Empire. Major incursions like the Siege of Paris in 885 and 886, where Viking forces besieged Paris for nearly a year, showcased the empire's defensive weaknesses. Although local leaders, notably Count Odo of Paris, managed to hold off the Vikings, Charles the Fat ultimately negotiated a £700 silver ransom and permitted the Vikings to pass through Francia and raid Burgundy. These concessions highlighted the decline in central authority, with local nobles increasingly responsible for their own defense, setting the stage for feudalism. Jean Favier argues that the Vikings' persistence accelerated the Carolingian Empire's decentralization, with regional lords like Count Odo and Baldwin II of Flanders establishing fortified defenses and consolidating local power. Heinrich Fichtenau notes that such events shifted defensive responsibilities to local rulers, underscoring the Carolingian decline. In 911, as Viking raids continued to disrupt the kingdom, West Frankish King Charles the Simple initiated a new approach by negotiating with the Viking leader Rollo. In the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte, Charles granted Rollo control over a significant territory along the Seine River. In exchange, Rollo agreed to defend the land from further Viking attacks and convert to Christianity, taking an oath of fealty to Charles. This treaty established Normandy, a region that became a crucial buffer against further Viking incursions. Historian Rosamund McKitterick suggests that the creation of Normandy was a pragmatic solution to Viking threats, transforming invaders into allies who absorbed Frankish culture and governance. Joachim Ehlers points out that Normandy's foundation foreshadowed the emergence of a unique, powerful Norman identity, one that would play a central role in European history. The establishment of Normandy marked a turning point for both Viking and Frankish societies. By converting a Viking raider into a legitimate ruler, Charles the Simple effectively laid the foundation for an independent Duchy of Normandy that would, over time, integrate Viking and Frankish customs. The Normans emerged as a new political entity with military prowess and a commitment to Christianity, signaling a shift from Viking raids to the Norman influence that would reshape medieval Europe. By the end of the 9th century, the Carolingian Empire's legacy was one of division and decentralization. The treaties of Verdun, Prüm, Meissen, and Ribemont had divided Charlemagne's grand empire into fragmented territories, each with increasingly autonomous rulers. The Viking invasions underscored the empire's vulnerability, and with the reliance on regional nobles for defense, the feudal system took root, replacing the centralized empire with a patchwork of smaller, independent states. This transformation set the stage for the medieval political landscape, where feudalism would dominate for centuries. This chapter provides a comprehensive view of the Carolingian Empire's final disintegration, covering each major treaty and the impact of Viking incursions. All right, let's quickly recap the journey we've taken through Frankish history. We started with the early Franks, divided into groups like the Salian Franks, Ripuarian Franks, and Mosan Franks, distinct tribes rather than a united people. The Merovingian dynasty, from the Salian Franks, first gained prominence under Childeric I, the earliest Merovingian king we know well. The Franks were federati under Rome, yet often asserted their independence. By the late 5th century, Childeric allied with last Roman governors of Gaul, Aegidius, and Syagrius, strengthening Frankish power. Then came Clovis I, who solidified Merovingian rule through his baptism in 496, aligning with the Church and establishing the Christian legacy for future Frankish kings. By the late 7th century, however, the Merovingian kings' power declined as they became figureheads, while real authority shifted to the mayors of the palace, paving the way for the rise of the Carolingians. Next, the Carolingians rose with Pippin the Short taking power, and Charlemagne expanded the realm, ushering in the Carolingian Renaissance of learning and cultural revival. His son, Louis the Pious, inherited the empire, but internal conflicts and treaties like Verdun in 843 began to split it, weakening unity. The fragmentation continued through further treaties like Prüm and Meersen, which carved up lands among heirs. Meanwhile, Viking raids ravaged the coasts, further destabilizing the empire and paving the way for the feudal structures that would reshape medieval Europe. Through each era, we've seen how the Franks transformed, setting the foundations for modern European history. So we came to the end of this really long and exhausting video. Hats off to those of you who were able to stay with me to the end. I have to admit that I very rarely have a will to watch history videos for so long. At the end, I have a special offer for you. For just the cost of a couple of latte macchiatos, you can support us on Patreon and help us create even more videos like this. I enjoy sharing history stories with you. If you have any special wishes about what to cover in one of our next videos, leave a comment below. I plan to talk about Viking history in next couple of weeks. So by joining our Patreon, you'll get 4 to 5 exclusive ebooks per month that are deeply connected to our videos and dive even deeper into great history stories we are discovering with our videos. Each ebook is packed with extra book recommendations for further studies and other resources like additional paper and videos. And starting November, expect a new video every week, each with its own ebook. Link is in the description below. If you're enjoying the journey, please like, share and subscribe. It means everything to us. Thanks for being here.